Hi everyone, my name is Leanne and today I am joined by a very special guest for a very special project that we're going to be doing. This is Charlotte.
Hi.
She can be found on various places on the internet. She's got a Bookstagram.
The Sound of 1,000 Books.
She's got a blog.
The Sound of 1,000 Books.weebly.com.
I'll put it all in the description because no one's going to remember that.
I don't even remember it half the time.
So Charlotte and I know each other from my publishing masters, and depending on when this video goes up, I may have done my Q&A on my publishing masters, maybe not. Who knows what I've got planned? I don't even know my own schedule. But if I have done that video and uploaded it, I will leave that linked in the description box as well if you want to find out more about doing a publishing masters. But that's how we met, and now we are actual real life friends. And Charlotte came up with a really cool video idea that we could do together, so take it away.
My favourite type of books are poetry and literary fiction, and that is hell for me. So I came up with this idea where she could read my favourite type of books, which is sci-fi, fantasy and fiction, which is her idea of hell.
Yeah, I've dabbled, and there have been a couple of things I've enjoyed, but ultimately I would never be like, I really want to read a book about spaceships.
Oh, I don't even read books about spaceships.
Oh, okay.
I read books about sword fights, like Lord of the Rings.
I think we've kind of used our knowledge of the things that we're really into to pick something that the other person would really be interested in. So this is like part 1 of the video, and you're going to see a part 2 in a few minutes where we come back and we're going to have read the books and see what we think of them.
I chose something that's one of my favourite books, and I figured Leanne might like it because it's based off of Macbeth's witches, specifically Macbeth's witches. It is Terry Pratchett's The Weird Sisters.
I've never read any Terry Pratchett before.
This is a great place to start. It's really good.
Yeah, and I also studied Macbeth at school, so I'm really familiar with it. I think the witches are really, really cool, and I'm generally just quite into witchy things. That's the area of fantasy that I'm probably most drawn to, is like magic, so I think you've done well.
And like, Terry Pratchett is a comedic genius, or was a comedic genius I should say, and this book has been read, dog-eared, loved, travelled many places with me. And it was one of the inspirations for my my undergrad project, one of my undergrad projects. When shall we meet again? Thunder, lightning, or in rain. When the hurly-burly's done, when the battle's lost and won. There to meet with Macbeth.
I enjoyed that a lot. So I think that's a really good choice for me, and the book that I have picked for Charlotte, I don't currently have with me, but I should have to give to her very, very soon because it's at my mum's house. I'm going to get my mum to send it over to me, like the darling that she is. But I have picked Plum by Holly McNish. Holly McNish is one of my absolute favourite poets. I think she's incredible. And the reason that I thought Charlotte might like Holly McNish is because she's very, very funny. She is a little bit filthy, which I thought Charlotte would enjoy. She's really accessible, and I think the word accessible can get thrown around with poetry kind of like an insult, which I think is stupid. Just because people can very easily understand what is happening doesn't mean it doesn't have any literary merit. If you know anything about the controversy around people who are very up themselves not liking Holly McNish, then, I mean, I don't agree with that. I think Holly McNish is incredible. I think she's one of the best poets writing in the UK at the moment. Holly McNish is really, really cool. She writes a lot about womanhood and sexism, and she writes a lot about sexuality and her experiences with men. She writes a lot about her relationship with her body and motherhood. She writes a lot about politics, and she's just a rollicking good time with a level of banter that I think you would really enjoy.
Okay.
Yeah.
That'll be fine. That's
So
good.
I will get this book and give it to Charlotte. And then we will report back. We will read them, we will swap books, and we will report back for us in a few weeks. For you guys, like, in a few seconds. So we read our books, and I feel like we had basically the reaction that we expected from them. It is now quite a few weeks later because we were so slow with reading what we were supposed to be reading.
It took me a day to read mine, and I missed like half the poems out because
Yeah. Well, we'll start with that. Okay, do you want to start by telling us what you thought of Plum?
For me, not being the biggest poetry fan, I enjoyed bits. I could see why Leanne loves this. There were bits where I was like, oh my gosh, this is so Leanne, that I can understand it, and I'm not going to say which bits.
The smutty bits, that's what she means.
Understand why she loves it.
The thing is, that's what I also found with reading this. I was like, this isn't exactly my cup of tea, but I can understand why you find this so funny. Like, I feel like this is very much your sense of humour.
It is my sense of humour.
And I had the same thing when my dear friend Dan, big up Dan if you watch these videos. I don't think Dan watches these videos.
Big up Dan.
But like a couple of birthdays ago, he did like the sweetest thing in the world, and he brought me his favourite book as like a birthday present. He showed up at my door at like midnight. And that was The Ocean at the End of the Lane by Neil Gaiman.
I love that book.
Which is kind of, I had a similar thing where I was like, oh, this isn't really my cup of tea, but I understand exactly why Dan likes this, and that's what I had with this. And I was like, oh, I feel like I understand you both better as people after reading like one of your favourite books.
Yeah, like the same with this. I can understand why you love it. However, I have found that I prefer poetry read out loud. So, Leanne sent a recording of one of hers, and I loved that more than everything that I read in this.
I'm so talented. But Holly McNish does a lot of like performances of her poetry. She's doing one at Derby Book Festival. You should go. I'll be there. None of you live in Derby. But you could go see her read there. And she's got a lot online and stuff as well.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of her poems lend themselves to that as well.
Yeah, but at the same time, I wasn't particularly keen on them, if that makes sense. Like, they were nice, but they weren't my cup of tea. Which doesn't make any sense because yours is on the same vein. So.
Yeah. What did you think about the fact that there's her like childhood and teenage poems mixed in with like her reactions to then reading those poems as an adult?
So there was a bit in here where she wrote a paragraph of where is it? Crap. She wrote a paragraph of something, and she was like introducing it, and she said something, and I preferred that bit because Rules for Turning 30, I think. It wasn't a poem, and I enjoyed that bit the most. It reminded me a little bit of Dolly Alderton, the Everything I Know About Love. Like, it reminded me of that, and I love that style of writing, but I just didn't enjoy the poems as much, even though it's a poetry book. But you know, you just...
It is quite a mixed medium kind of collection though.
Yeah.
Like, there are little bits of prose in there as well.
Yeah. There was one I liked that was shaped like a dandelion.
Love a good concrete poem. I'm a big slut for a concrete poem, yeah.
Oh,
I did one shaped like a plane once, but it looks a bit like the Angel of the North.
I can't really see it. But yeah, yeah.
Do you think your perception of poetry has changed in any way, or is it kind of the same after
It's
reading
the
that?
same, but I know what I prefer, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So, like, I like the little darker ones. Like an author that I follow on Twitter, David Owens.
If I can find
David
a
Owen.
link, I'll leave it in the description.
Like, I liked his little dark poems, but I think that's also because I like him as a writer as well. Whereas this is the first one I've read of Holly McNish, and it's not really a thing.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Yeah.
And I preferred yours as well.
Aww.
But I just...
Someone publish my poetry, please.
They're really good. I highly recommend.
Shall we move on to The Weird Sisters? Yeah, like I said, I did enjoy this book, and I could really see why you like it so much. It's basically kind of quite a metafictional retelling of Macbeth and the Weird Sisters, but set in this like Discworld universe, which is a disc on the back of a turtle.
On the on the back of also 4 elephants.
So is the turtle on the back of the 4 elephants, or
No.
are the elephants on the turtle?
The 4 elephants are on top of the turtle. Greater 2.
And then there's a disc on top,
And there's a
and they're
disc on
floating through space.
So this is probably where the Flat Earthers got their all of their stuff from.
They got it from Terry
They got it
Pratchett.
from Terry Pratchett.
See, I think that's the element of fantasy that I don't quite get on with, because I'm like, but there's not 4 elephants in space.
It's called high fantasy when it's completely made up.
Yeah, so I spoke about this. I did a video where I did like quizzes of which Game of Thrones character I would be. You all slept on that video. It was really funny. I will leave that linked down below because that video was funnier than anyone gave it credit for. But I spoke about how I don't get on with Game of Thrones because it's like, there's no dragons. Dragons aren't real. The kind of fantasy I like is kind of, I think like you with the poetry, where you're reading different kinds of it and you're figuring out where exactly your tastes lie in it. I think the kind of fantasy I like is like low fantasy, where it's like our world, but there's just bits of either magic or bits of strange goings on.
I have a book suggestion for you, actually.
That was the whole point of this video, guys.
Sorry. It's again not set in our world, but it's a sad book, I guess.
Love a sad book.
It's called State of Sorrow by Melinda Salisbury, and I didn't get on with it, but I can see why people did.
Yeah.
And I feel like it would be a book that you'd like. It's high fantasy. She's made up her own world.
Yeah.
But it's really good.
Well, I quite like...
on the stream for you, I mean.
Yeah. Well, I quite like fantasy where you are seeing it, and with sci-fi as well, where you're seeing it through someone's eyes who is also unfamiliar to that world. So Harry Potter, Nevermore, she hates Harry Potter, we'll just get that out of the way. But also things like The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, which I think is very similar in tone to this.
Yeah.
But because you're seeing it through Arthur's eyes, and he's similarly like, this doesn't make any sense. Like, I feel like connected to him, whereas with this, I was just like, this doesn't make any sense. And there was no one in here who was like, you're right, Leanne, this doesn't make any sense.
I love the strains of, like, thought that go off, and, like, I love, the footnotes at the bottom.
See, I don't like the footnotes.
Oh, they add to it, though.
See, but I can understand why it's kind of like a little fourth wall break with the author, and I can understand why that would be really appealing. But I was just like, oh, if it's that important, you should just have it in the main body text.
Some of it just goes off on a tangent.
Yeah,
and,
no.
like, there was one book I read of his that had, like, an asterisk after, like, a really short sentence, and then, like, 1.5 pages later, the footnote was over.
Even there was a footnote in here that was like, oh, I'm not going to find it, but it was like half a page long. I was like, that's so unnecessary. But even though I know that's like the point, I know that he's doing that for a reason.
God, look at that.
That is a well-loved spine.
Oh gosh, it genuinely looks like it's about to fall apart.
I was really worried that the pages would start falling out when I read it, so I was quite precious with it. One thing that I did really like about it was how he writes female characters. I loved it. Like, he's so... Without being, like... stereotyping, I was very impressed with a man of his generation writing female characters the way he does, with as much depth and complexity and wit. And also there's a lot of humour about, like, masculinity. It's really near the start, and I wish I'd highlighted it because it really made me laugh. But there's a bit where he was like, for some reason men like to say this. And it was just really funny.
It is, it's good, isn't it? He was such a great author, and there's so much more that he could have written, obviously, because he had Alzheimer's.
Yeah, I remember watching a documentary not long before he passed away. How many books did he write? Do you know? Is it like...
38, 42 books, I think?
Is that... And that's just Discworld books, so he's written other books as well.
Yeah, they aren't all in here.
He's written a lot of books.
I don't think that I will keep my low opinion of poetry.
Really?
Yeah, but
you're dipping your toes in.
I'll dip into something. I mean, I don't know. I think it's better read out loud, and I definitely feel like if this was an audiobook, I'd listen to it. But then I didn't understand some of the poems because just...
Yeah. But I think you don't necessarily need to understand everything that's going on. Like, I find with that with poetry sometimes, like, I think there are 2 ways of reading poetry, and not all poems lend themselves to being read that way, but you can kind of go through it with a pen and, like, mark it up and figure out if like, what kind of themes and imagery is happening. Or you can just kind of read it and be like, oh, I liked how those words rhymed. Yeah. And both of them are just as valid of an experience, I think.
That's true. You're right. So would you give your fantasy more of a go, more of a time?
I wouldn't be against reading another Terry Pratchett book, because even though the humor didn't exactly gel with me, there were those moments where I was like, oh, that is funny. But I think it has slightly because I've been thinking about it in this way and thinking about what is it, because I knew I was going to be doing this video with you. I was like thinking about what am I going to say, what is it about this that I don't really get on with. It has helped me figure out how I feel about fantasy more. And I think that's going to make me better at choosing fantasy books that I would like to read.
Yeah. Oh, look at this book though, it's falling apart. Look how sad it is.
It's not sad, it's well loved.
Yeah, I mean, this was my parents' book.
And that's really sweet.
That's why it's secondhand. So they read it, and then I read it, and then I've read it and read it and read it over and over again. So, 1989 is Corgi, yeah. 1989 this was published.
That book's older than me.
The book's older than me. So obviously I started reading this like quite young.
Yeah. I think people who have grown up reading Terry Pratchett have a real kind of attachment to it.
Yeah, this is why. So Terry Pratchett was the first like fantasy books that I read, which is why I don't think I enjoyed Harry Potter as much.
Whereas I think I've had the opposite. Like Harry Potter would have been the first fantasy books I read. Yeah, I think before that I was just reading a lot of Jacqueline Wilson. So yeah, that was us making each other read a book that we could have possibly hated, but it was alright. We've learnt more about each other. I think we understand why we struggle with these genres a little bit more.
Yeah.
Which I think will help us make better choices when trying to dabble in that genre a little bit more.
But it is good to branch out, at least step your toe in like a lake of something else.
Dip your toe in the water?
Dip your toe in the water.
Yeah, let me know if you guys have done anything like this before. Are there certain genres that you're a little bit reluctant to pick up? Is there a book in a genre that you didn't really like that you were surprised that you really got on with? I'd love to have a chat with you guys down in the comments. Charlotte might hang around in the comments as well.
I will be lurking.
She'll be lurking like a gherkin.
Lovely week, guys! I will be lurking in the comments below.
She will be lurking in the comments. I will be down in the comments. I hope you guys are having a brilliant week, and I will talk to you in my next video.